Cholesterol-free, trans fats, polyunsaturated fats, fish oil. Unfortunately for you and I, these jargons don't necessarily translate whether the oils in question is actually healthy for you, which you can imagine has led to many people, even in my practice with patients, to be left confused about which oils to choose. So in today's video, we're going to find out which oil is generally the better oil for you to choose, and is there such a thing as a truly healthy oil? Now, before we dive right in, we gotta first understand what exactly is a fat. Now, a fat basically is a combination of different fatty acids connected via a glycerol backbone, making it a glycerol ester, if you will. So things like pork lard, chicken fat, beef tallow, butter, all animal sources, and you have coconut oil, palm oil, vegetable oil, safflower oils, seed oils, olive oil, which are all vegetative in nature. Now, when it comes to the function of fats, fats are considered an essential nutrient because number one, it provides calories. For every 1 gram of fat, there is 9 calories. That is more than double the calories provided from proteins or carbohydrates respectively. But beyond that, it also holds a lot of vitamins in the form of vitamin A, D, E and K, which are only fat soluble, meaning to say that you can only obtain them through fat sources. As such, most guidelines will recommend that you consume at least 25% to 35% of calories coming from fat in your daily diet. Now, beyond that, it's also used in building of cell membranes, nervous function, muscle movement, blood clotting, and a lot of many other functions. Fats can come from both animal and non-animal sources. There are effectively 3 major umbrellas that you should be aware of. The first one is what we call as saturated fats. Now, chemically speaking, this means there is no double bonds between the fatty acids within the fatty chain, and this allows the fat to be solid at room temperature. Most animal fats fall into this category, so think things like butter, lard, beef tallow, with the exception of fish oil, and most vegetable oils do not fall into the category except for coconut oil and palm oil. And the next major umbrella is trans fats. Now, trans fats was first introduced back in the industrial era when saturated fats was deemed to be potentially harmful, and it was basically through a process of hydrogenation where vegetable oils were hydrogenated partially to form solid structures at room temperature, making a fat much more stable for transport purposes and logistics. Now, some common sources of trans fats are things like shortening and margarine, and an easy way to spot them is to look into an ingredient list or nutrition label, and if you see partially hydrogenated fats, those are trans fats. Now, last but not least, the final category is unsaturated fats. Now, unsaturated fats are generally vegetable or seed or nut oils which are liquid at room temperature. Under unsaturated fats, it can be further branched down to monounsaturated fats or polyunsaturated fats. No one oil is singularly just one type. Most oils are a combination of a few different categories. So bear in mind when I say, for example, palm oil is a saturated fat, what I mean to say is that it's primarily consisting of saturated fatty acids, although it has other fats in it as well. So how do you tell if an oil is actually healthy? If you look into these 3 major categories, trans fats unfortunately was eventually found out to be worse than saturated fats, with an increased risk of death by any cause by 34%, coronary heart disease death by 28%, and coronary heart disease risk by 21%. Now, most studies cite this to be related to the lipid-inducing effect, where trans fats actually would increase your bad or LDL cholesterols while reducing your good or HDL cholesterols. All in all, definitively speaking, trans fats should be heavily avoided at all costs. In fact, in most countries these days, trans fats or partially hydrogenated fats are now banned in utilization. This includes Malaysia, although sometimes if you have a keen eye, you can still find them every now and then in the supermarket. It's really important to look at the nutrition label as well as the ingredient list, and if you see partially hydrogenated fats, it's really important to steer away. And it's a very important distinction to recognize that fully hydrogenated fats are not trans fats but instead are saturated fats in nature. Now, when it comes to saturated fats, the situation gets a little bit more complicated. Now, as an overall picture and a general rule of thumb, saturated fats has been shown to actually increase all cholesterol, both LDL, bad, and HDL or good cholesterol as well. Now, there's a few disclaimers that you should be generally aware when it comes to these claims on saturated fats. Number 1, saturated fats are generally recommended to be within 10% of your total caloric intake, and as such, you should generally be okay when it comes to cholesterol. It's important to know that even with an abnormal cholesterol profile, it doesn't confirm heart disease or death. It boils down to a much bigger picture with other comorbidities like diabetes, high blood sugars, hypertension, and also family history. So what I'm trying to say here is that even though saturated fats increases cholesterol, it doesn't spell doom just as it. Of course, if you are someone with hypercholesterolemia or if you have an existing abnormal cholesterol profile, it's probably important to check whether you are taking excessive amounts of saturated fats in the first place, which can help this. And third, it's really important to note that saturated fat alone doesn't determine whether a fat is healthy or not. A fat may be saturated in nature, but that doesn't necessarily mean it is inherently bad. So for example, in the case of palm oil, which is primarily palmitic acid, which is a saturated fat, it also contains a good amount of oleic acid, which is a monounsaturated fat, which is traditionally healthy as well. In addition to that, it also potentially may contain vitamin E, retinol, or vitamin A, which all can also contribute to lower risk of heart disease as well. So what I'm trying to say here is that there is more confounders and more complication in the mix. But generally speaking, when it comes to saturated fats, you can consume it, but generally keep it at a minimum amount. Now when it comes to unsaturated fats, these are the fats that are generally touted as the healthy fats for you. So under this umbrella, you have monounsaturated fats like olive oil or even canola oil. When you replace excessive consumption of saturated or trans fats with these oils at a regulated amount, it actually shows improvement in cardiovascular outcomes. So think of things like cholesterol or blood lipids, high blood pressure, or even blood sugar control as well. Now the same thing goes with polyunsaturated fats like soybean oil or even corn oil, and the same thing has been demonstrated when you replace excessive amounts of saturated or trans fats with polyunsaturated fats at a controlled regulated amount. Now under the same category of polyunsaturated fats, you may have also heard of omega-3 fatty acids. Now omega-3 fatty acids comes in the form of fish oil but also in seeds and nuts as well. Now, in terms of the benefits of omega-3 fatty acids in the population of individuals with an existing heart condition, a fish oil supplementation has been shown to provide some form of benefit in terms of cardiovascular markers. However, when extrapolated to the general healthy population, a fish oil supplement doesn't necessarily help. The general recommendation is still to consume a mass variety of different omega-3 fatty acids, for example, in terms of seeds, nuts, as well as oily fish like salmon or mackerel, or if you're in Malaysia, tenggiri. What we do understand is most people do not consume enough omega-3 fats, and what we do know is that when you consume enough omega-3 fats, it does have cardiovascular protective benefits in the long run. Now that is a general approach as a guideline to understand what type of fats you should get. Generally speaking, trans fats absolutely no, saturated fats little bit here and there. Unsaturated fats in the form of monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, definitely a staple to take. However, that isn't the final say when it comes to selecting your oils. There are two major things to look into. The first thing is the number of times you actually use the oil. So for example, if you deep fry a lot, which is something you shouldn't be doing a lot at home anyways, the number of times actually correspond to the deterioration quality of the oil. So even if I have a healthy olive oil but I keep frying it over and over and over again, it actually increases the number of trans fats and other unhealthy components found in the oil. So that's a very important thing to take note. The second thing is also what else is present in the oil. Today's oils don't just contain the oil or fat in question, it also sometimes bring other things to the party. So for example, there are other bioactive compounds which can be beneficial for you. Now some of these bioactive compounds include things like antioxidants such as vitamin A and vitamin E, biophenols, phytosterols, and even squalene, which all have been shown to not only improve cardiovascular metrics like LDL cholesterol, skin health, but also a lot of other benefits. So when you put all that into perspective, you can actually mark an oil from two things. Number one, the type of fat as well as the presence of any bioactive compounds. Now, the Nutrition Research Australia has put up a very good table illustrating this point. When you benchmark all the common oils in the supermarket against the type of fat as well as the availability of bioactive compounds, you can actually see a very clear distinction of which types of fats are healthy. Now bear in mind, under this table, trans fats are not included because in most countries trans fats are banned. Now back to the table, if you look at the common oils available, we can already see that if you have a saturated fat, that decreases a benefit score for the oil in question. And out of this table, you can immediately surmise that the best oils are extra virgin olive oil and canola oil with 6 positive components either in the form of unsaturated fats plus some bioactive compounds. Following that, you have soybean, sunflower, avocado, macadamia and hemp seed oil with 4 positive components. Now regular or refined olive oil comes in next at only 3 positive components. And lastly, you have the fats with some form of saturated fats with things like butter, palm oil, coconut oil and rice bran oil. Now like I said before, saturated fats alone is not enough to qualify whether an oil is actually healthy or not. It also depends on many other factors. For example, in the case of palm oil, studies have actually shown when you have a population that consumes excessive amounts of trans and saturated fats, and when you switch over to palm oil with regulated amounts of fat in question, you can actually see a benefit in their cardiovascular markers. This is mainly contributed to the oleic acid that is also found in palm oil, at least at speculation level by scientists. But hey, if you want to find out more whether palm oil is actually a healthy oil or not, do let me know in the comment section below and we can make an entire video about palm oil. Don't forget, palm oil also may contain vitamin E and vitamin A, so it's much more complicated than you think. So based on what we understand now, we can definitely see that extra virgin olive oil and canola oils are the oils to consume as a daily basis. And that's personally what I do as well. I tend to eat a lot of extra virgin olive oil. However, with that said, there are a couple of things that I should remind you. Now, number one, you may have heard of the myth that you cannot cook with extra virgin olive oil. And to that we say BS, because there are new evidence that actually shows that you can actually cook with extra virgin olive oil and it is actually more stable when you compare it with other oils. Studies have also showed that when you cook with extra virgin olive oil with things like onions and garlic, it also makes additional bioactive compounds more readily available for absorption in the body. So things like lycopene from tomatoes, quercetin and many others. Now another important thing to note is also the amount of oil you consume. Now even though extra virgin olive oil and canola oil is healthy, for example, you shouldn't be flooding your plate with oil just because it is healthier. It's also important to note that oil brings in extra calories and excessive calories can also lead to weight gain and other myriad of issues. I do say that with a pinch of salt because extra virgin olive oil is currently being studied to see whether by taking more extra virgin olive oil than the standard recommended guidelines, does it actually bring more benefits. And they're trying to review whether the 25 to 35% guideline of fats to actually be a bit more flexible in nature. Now before you go, I kind of want to leave you with a couple of shopping tips. When it comes to buying oil, try to choose the smaller bottle if possible. This is mainly due to the fact that unless you are deep frying in a commercial restaurant setting, you don't need that bulk can of oil. The problem with oils is that if you leave them exposed, they can get oxidized, and when they are oxidized, trans fats can be produced, which is not really good for you. The other thing, especially when it comes to extra virgin olive oil, is to look into the harvest by date and not just the best by date. The harvest by date indicates when the olives in question were harvested. The closer the harvest date to your purchasing date, the more the bioactive compounds, the healthier the oil. And one last final thing is to always keep your oils in a dark area with no exposure to sunlight. Sunlight can lead to oxidation and you wouldn't want that in your oils. So there you go. Extra virgin olive oil and canola oil seem to be the better ones, but you can also refer to that list by Nutrition Research Australia for better decision-making processes. Now, bear in mind that oils alone are not guaranteed to give you health in question. It needs to be paired with other things like vegetable fruits intake, exercise, lifestyle and many other stuff. Now if you learned something from today's video, make sure to give this video a like, and if you want more content like this, please consider subscribing. We are producing content like this on a weekly basis, and in fact, the next thing we're going to talk about is oil spreads or butter replacement spreads. Are they good for you? We'll find out. Bye.